You sit down to work, you have every intention of getting it done, and then 45 minutes later, you're watching a video about something you don't even care about. Your task is untouched, and you genuinely cannot explain how you got here. That's not laziness, that's a trap, and it was engineered specifically for your brain. Millennials have been called the laziest generation in modern history. Participation trophies, avocado toast, can't commit to anything. But here's what the people saying that don't understand. The millennial brain didn't fail. It got hijacked. And the science behind how it happened is something most people have never been shown. Because this isn't about discipline. It isn't about work ethic. It's about what happened to an entire generation's dopamine system during the most critical window of neurological development, and what that's done to their ability to focus in a world that keeps accelerating. Here's what's actually happening in your brain when you can't focus. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. That's the popular version. The more accurate description is that dopamine is the anticipation chemical. It surges not when you get the reward, but when you expect it, when something might be coming. That distinction matters enormously. Every notification, every scroll, every refresh is a dopamine trigger, not because it delivers something good, but because it might. The variable reward system. Pull the lever, maybe get something. That uncertainty is precisely what makes it so difficult to stop. Neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz documented this in research that won a share of the Nobel Prize. The brain's dopamine neurons fire hardest not at reward, but at the unpredictable possibility of reward. Millennials were the first generation to go through adolescence, the exact window when the brain's dopamine system is most sensitive and most malleable, with smartphones, social media, and algorithmic feeds that were specifically engineered around this mechanism, not by accident, by design. And here's the part the tech companies don't advertise. The same mechanism that makes scrolling irresistible makes sustained focus feel genuinely painful, not difficult, painful. And there's a neurological reason for that most people have never heard. Focused work requires your brain to stay in a low dopamine state for an extended period. No new input, no variable reward, just the slow, effortful process of working through something difficult with no guarantee of a payoff at the end. For a brain that has been conditioned to expect a dopamine hit every 90 seconds, that sustained low stimulus state doesn't feel like productivity. It feels like deprivation, like something is wrong, like you should be checking something. A study from the University of California, Irvine, found that after an interruption, a notification, a tab switch, a quick check, it takes an average of 23 minutes for the brain to return to the same depth of focus it had before. 23 minutes, and most millennials are interrupting themselves every few minutes without even realizing it. This is the trap. It isn't a character flaw. It's a conditioned neurological response to an environment that was deliberately designed to capture attention and never release it. But the dopamine hijack is only half the problem. The other half is cortisol. Millennials entered adulthood during the 2008 financial crisis. They graduated into a collapsed job market, took on record levels of student debt, and watched the stable career paths their parents promised them evaporate in real time. The psychological result was a generation with chronically elevated baseline anxiety, a nervous system that never fully came down from high alert. Cortisol, the stress hormone, directly suppresses the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, sustained attention, and impulse control. The research is clear. Chronic stress doesn't just make you feel scattered, it neurologically impairs the exact cognitive functions that focused, deep work requires. So you have a generation whose dopamine system was hijacked during adolescence and whose cortisol levels were elevated through early adulthood, and then everyone stands back and says they just don't have enough discipline. Here's what the research actually shows about getting out of this, because it isn't motivational advice, it's neurological retraining, and it works faster than most people expect. The brain that was conditioned can be reconditioned. That's not optimism, it's plasticity. The same malleability that made the millennial brain vulnerable to hijacking is the same property that allows it to be rewired. The mechanism is dopamine fasting, not in the extreme wellness influencer version, but in the precise neurological sense. Deliberately extending the time between dopamine triggers trains the brain to tolerate and eventually seek out the low-stimulus state that deep work requires. Cal Newport, a computer science professor at Georgetown, documented this extensively in research on what he calls deep work, the ability to focus without distraction on cognitively demanding tasks. The protocol is straightforward. Start with 25 minutes of single-task focus with all notifications off, no tab switching, no phone, just one thing. Then a 5-minute break. Repeat. Over weeks, the brain recalibrates its expectation of reward intervals. The deprivation feeling fades, focus starts to feel less like punishment and more like flow. It is not instant, but the neurological research is consistent. Brains that practice sustained attention get measurably better at it within 4 to 6 weeks of deliberate practice. Millennials were handed a world that demanded their attention from every direction at every hour with tools specifically engineered by some of the most sophisticated behavioral psychologists on Earth, and then they were blamed for looking. The focus isn't gone. It was never the problem. It got buried under a system that profits from distraction and a story that blamed the distracted for the burying. You can reclaim it, not through willpower alone, but through understanding exactly what was done to your brain and deliberately choosing to undo it, one uninterrupted hour at a time. The trap was engineered. The exit is too. If this reframed something for you, subscribe. We break down the psychology behind things people feel but can't explain. Hit the join button if you want to support the channel. It keeps these videos coming.